Hello and welcome to Programming IPL in MATLAB. I'm Vishaka Srinivasan from MATLAB Helper, and so far we've learned an introduction to what the app designer is and what are the components and the other features of the app designer. In this session, we'll actually begin with the IPL app. We'll be incorporating the knowledge from our previous videos of extracting data from the web and using that to visualize it. So I hope you find this interesting.
So let's begin. These are the functions that I created of each of those possibly available data in the website. I just converted them as a function. The entire code remains as it is. And also remember that the name of the function and the name of the file is the same. And it is stored in the same place where you're going to be storing your app as well. So let's begin. So here we are. I'm going to be using a panel to begin with. I'm using a panel because if I hide a panel, everything that's contained inside the panel will also be hidden, which is why it's also known as a container. For example, I add a button to this and I click on this panel. I go to the interactivity and unclick this. Then the entire thing's going to be gone. And then when I make it visible again, comes back. So let me add color to this. I'm changing the foreground to blue. No, not the foreground, sorry, the background to blue. And I'm changing the foreground color to white. I'm going to make this bold. And let's just scroll up a bit. Over here I'm going to change the title to IPL T20 and the font size to 15, and I've already made it bold. I am making it center aligned. Okay, now I want to take two things from the user. One is the year and the other is the stats. So let me tell you why. If you actually look at this website here, you can see that this part this part is always going to be constant for everybody, but with each year the year changes, and with one of these titles changing, this changes as well. So I'll be needing a year, which I'll be taking from an edit field numeric. So the edit field numeric will have numerical value, and I'm changing the limits of these as well. First, let me make this better. Let this be 12 only. I'm changing the color to white. There you go. Now this thing, the limits is from minus infinity to plus infinity. I'm changing it to 2008 to 2020. The year, the value changes automatically. So this value is the value that is arbitrarily shown here. Next, I'm using a drop down for the displaying of what data has to be shown. I'm changing this to stat. I make this bold and I change the color to white. So that is that. Now, what exactly is this? Option 1, items. If you see the drop down in the inspector tab, you see that there are items. Here it has 4 items and the value is option 1. So when you actually run this, I'll save this app. Option 1 is the option that's automatically chosen, but you have 4 options in all. So you have all the items and the value is the value that's chosen already. So if I change this to 2 or say 3, then what happens here? I run this. You can see here also it's changed. Option 3 is the one that's automatically chosen. So that is your value, that is the value of the drop down button, and items are the total available options. Now what I want to be, what has to be displayed here is these values, these batting, like most runs in an over, most fours, and all of these things. So how do you actually get this? If you have a look at the source code, around the line 658, you have this line which keeps repeating over and over. So if I actually just have this, I can use this as a delimiter to find all of these things. So I actually have a file written for this. It's called titles, and it does this part. Let us just run through this to see how and what the values are available. So the first value is missing. That means it does not exist. But from the second value, you already have everything that is required. So if you actually have a look at this thing, you have all of these values present over here, all of these titles per se over here in this column here. So there is this table which has a heading head, and so table dot head has these values. So how are we actually going to be using this? We'll need to add a function. Now this function has to be a startup function because this the drop down should have these items as soon as you run the entire application. So you click on the app IPL T20 and then click on add callback startup function. So I'm taking a variable t, and in it I'm storing titles. So when this is the function titles, when I call this, I get the table t which has the column head. So I need t dot head that has to be added to my items. So to access the items, I'm going to use app dot stat dropdown dot items equals t dot head to end. So what I'm saying is, in this application there's a stat drop down menu. Of that I'm talking about the items. So in items you have to store t dot head, the values from 2 to the end of the string. So let's just run this. You can see that the stats already showing most runs and all these values. So yeah, that is there now. So let's move on now. I want to be able to show a table, so I'm adding a table. So what will this table be showing? It will be showing the values of what year and whatever the stat I'm choosing of that. So it's going to be showing the values corresponding to that. So I'm adding this here. I'm also adding a button here. I'm adding this button because the table must be loaded when I click on this button. So that means there must be a callback here. I'm adding a callback to the load button. What must happen here is that as soon as you click on it, it must display the corresponding details, or it must extract the corresponding details from the specific URL. So how do you get the URL? So there is some arbitrary part to the URL. For example, if we switch back here, you can see that this part is always going to be constant from this till here. So I'm copying that directly over here and I'm pasting it. Now I'm getting the year from the user, so I'm saving that as year equals app dot edit value year edit field dot value. Now this is going to be a numerical value because it already states we edit field numeric. So I want to be converting this to the string. Now the next part comes the stat part. So let me just run this, and you'll be able to see that the runs, there are spaces and there are brackets. But if you actually go to this website here, and you see here that there's no brackets and there are no spaces as well. So we need to be replacing all these things respectively. So let me just close this application and I go to the code view. I get a value equals app.stat dropdown menu dot value. Now this is going to be a string. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to replace value. So replace in the string what was previously existing was my open bracket, and I want to be changing it with nothing, like just I want it removed. So I do that again for my close brackets. So let me just display whatever we've done so far so that we get a better idea of what has to be done. So I click on load and then I go to my this thing. You can see that the value that's being displayed is most runs. Let me just clear this part, make this a larger space. Now I change this to high scores and then I load it. You can directly see that the high scores has been printed. Now you also see that the highest scores here that's being printed is in capital and has a space in between. So I don't want that. What I'm going to be doing here is I will do value equals lower. So I'm going to make it all in lowercase and then I'll see what it does. I'll run this again. I load. Now you can see that the most runs that we got is all in smalls. I'll do the same thing for the highest scores. Yes, so we've got it in the lowercase. Now we will be using this value for two things here. One is for the URL. So the URL has hyphen, so it will be like highest hyphen scores. And for the case of my function, they must have an underscore, so this becomes underscore scores. So I need two parts to this string that we've got. So what I'll do is u equals, in this I'm going to replace all the spaces with a hyphen. This is for my URL. So I'm going to replace the value. I am going to replace in the value space with hyphen. The next thing I want is my function. So in that case, I'll be replacing the hyphen with an underscore. Okay. So now what I have to be doing is I will be converting this string f to a function. So f equals, there's this thing called str2func. It constructs a function handle from the character vector. So we have a character vector f and I'm going to be making a function of that. So the next thing we're going to be doing is this, add it to a variable. I'm creating a global variable here because I'll be using this table time and again. So I call this table capital T. I go down here. Every time you're using a global variable or a property, you have to refer it to as app.t. So that's the difference between a global variable and a normal variable here. If I have a variable here, I want to access this variable elsewhere also, the content of it will remain constant. Like you can access the data in any other function as well. So I'm going to be calling the function f and I'll pass my URL plus the year plus. Now there's a slash between the URL and the the stats that has to be displayed. So forward slash plus u, and I will be displaying it in my UI table. So there's app dot UI table dot data equals app dot t. Let's just run this. Load. You can see that the corresponding values have come up. Let's verify with this web page here. The first person to have scored the highest in the most runs was Sean Marsh. Sean Marsh from Kings 11, Punjab. There's Gautam Gambhir. So I guess this is correct. Now, one important thing to notice here is that the column names have not been taken from the table. Only the data has been taken, but not the column names. So to get that, we do app dot UI table dot column name equals field name of app.t. So because this table was converted from a structure, the structure had heading, features and field names. The table also has a field name. So in the case of the title that we saw here, if you can see here, it had a feature, it had a field name head. Similarly, if you run another program here with respect to the best batting average and all of these things, you can see that the nationality, the team, these all things become your field names. So what I'm doing is I'm directly adding all the field names as the column name. So I load this, and you can clearly see that the thing, the column names have changed to what has been required. So now if I change this to 2014, even if I leave it at 201, it says that the value must be between 2008 to 2020. So that is there, 2014, and I want to see the best bowling strike rate, and I load this. You can see that the the characteristic features have also changed, like the wickets, average, and all of these things have changed. Earlier it was about the runs and the strike rate of the batsman. Here it's about the bowlers. So yeah.
So this brings us to the end of this session. In the next session, we'll be learning how to utilize the data obtained in this table and obtain a pie chart and other ways of visualizing this. I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have, please like, share and subscribe to our channel.